Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Wonderful. I'm the Reverend William Levwood, affectionately known as Rev Lev. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the minister here at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm so excited that all of you decided to join us this morning. I see that we have a lot of visitors. That's really exciting. We've got a cornucopia of a service today. Before we start, if you're in person, please remember to silence your cell phones. And for all of us, in person and online, let's take a deep breath as we center ourselves for worship. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land, who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Paulette Lichtman-Panzer, and I'm delighted that you all came this morning. This congregation is a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home where we inspire each other to live our values. And I think this particular phrase, this particular three-part phrase, for me, encapsulates in just a few words what this church is all about. Because together, we care in community, we grow in spirit, and we act for justice. I hope you got a name tag or have put your name on your Zoom name tag. And if you need help with that, just let anybody in the chat know, or anybody in the congregation as well. If you are not new to Accotink, look around. Help us live up to our mission to be a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home for all by reaching out and making a connection, especially to newcomers. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour, online and in person, immediately after this service.
So with that, we're actually going to practice, we're going to say this. We've been saying these words sometimes, or a version of these, the shortened version, as we light our chalice. So actually, I want everybody's attention, even the children, to read along with this, okay? So these are words of covenant. You're going to see them on our screen. You're going to see that we have the first and second line on the second slide. And I hope it's big enough because I crammed it in there. So fingers crossed. All right, let's say them all together. Love is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. Love is the practice of our living tradition. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to help everyone flourish with dignity by building accessible and inclusive communities. Honor the web of life by protecting Earth and all beings from exploitation. Be beloved community by dismantling racism and all systemic oppression. Cultivate generosity by sharing our faith, presence, and resources. Celebrate diversity by embracing our differences with love and respect, and transform the world with love by growing together spiritually and ethically. So that's all those new values, but this month we're looking at the value of generosity. So that generosity is rooted in relationships of mutuality, interdependence, and reciprocity, and it's one of these foundational values of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Now, earlier this month, we explored together how generosity is something that we share together. That it's more than something that we give and receive, that we're giving and receiving in mutual relationship, in mutual sharing the whole time. We also explored earlier this month the connection between gratitude, last Sunday, gratitude and generosity, and how that inspires us to do justice making. And we'll be doing more of that today as we explore what it means to share our presence and our resources. That's the doing part of generosity, sharing our presence and our resources in the context of interdependence, mutuality, and respect.
Now, I'm going to read part 1 of Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree. Once there was a tree who loved a little boy, and every day the boy would come and he would gather her leaves and make them into crowns and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk and swing from her branches and eat apples. And they would play hide and seek, and when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree very, very much, and the tree was happy. But time went by, and the boy grew older, and the tree was often alone. Then one day the boy came to the tree, and the tree said, "Come, boy, climb on my branches, go up my trunk, and swing as much as you want. Eat apples, play in my shade, and be happy." "I'm too big to climb and play," said the boy. "I want to buy things, and I want to have fun. I want some money. Can you give me some money?" "I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I have only leaves and apples. But take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you'll have money and you'll be happy." And so the boy climbed up the tree, gathered her apples, and carried them away, and the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and the tree was sad. And then one day the boy came back, and the tree absolutely shook with joy. And she said, "Come, boy, climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and be happy." "I'm too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm. I want a wife, and I want children, and so I really need a house. Can you give me a house?" "Well, I have no house," said the tree. "The forest is my house, but you may cut off my branches and build a house, and then you will be happy." And so the boy cut off her branches and carried them away to build the house, and the tree was happy. Now the giving tree still stood. The boy had stayed away for a very long time, and when he came back, the tree was so happy she could hardly speak. "Come, boy," she whispered, come and play." "I am too old and sad to play," said the boy, who had made a fortune in the world. "I want a boat that will take me far away from here. Can you give me a boat?" "Cut down my trunk and make a boat," said the tree. "Then you can sail away and be happy." And so the boy cut down her trunk and made a boat and sailed away. And the tree was happy, but not really.
So the giving tree. I'm convinced that Shel Silverstein knew what he was doing when he wrote this, but who knows? I think actually that a better title in some ways, if we wanted to lift up what's maybe a little bit hidden, that I think is meant to be hidden, but that we're also supposed to pick up on, is if the book was called The Greedy Boy instead of The Giving Tree. Now, it starts out with the boy and the tree in a relationship of mutuality, right? They're both participating and enjoying each other. He's swinging from the trees, he's resting in the shade, and it's really a connected relationship where the generosity and the connection is flowing freely between both characters. But as the boy gets older, he loses this connection with the tree, begins to see the tree as just a resource to be exploited rather than a being in her own right. Unfortunately, too often, this is how we treat the natural world. And unfortunately, too often, this is how we treat other people as well, more as objects than as subjects. And I think it's no accident that the boy in the story is a he, and the tree in the story is a she. Writer and thinker Ryan Eisler has suggested that the devaluation and oppression of women is the root oppression, is the training ground where we're taught about superior and inferior, and that once we have that blueprint, we can apply it as needed to any other groups that we need to demonize in order to do those greedy, power-hungry things that we want to do. So too often, like in the story, but in multiple parts of our life and in our societal and global life as well, we do this. Too often, as I mentioned, we also do this to Earth, exploiting Earth and most of Earth's beings as resources, rather than, like in the beginning of this story, engaging with Earth and all beings in relationships of interdependence, mutuality, reciprocity, and respect. And it's not only wrong to do this, it's dangerous, as our hymn makes clear, when it says, if at any time we cease such channels to provide, the very founts of love for us will soon be parched and dry. And the hymn ends with this phrase, we cease to give, we cease to have, such is the law of love. Now, I love this hymn. Brad can attest. I try to find a reason to put this hymn in all the time, okay? Except for the fact that it ends on such a sour note. So it's kind of hard to find the place for it. But it is true that when we cease to give, we cease to have. Such is the law of love. And I think that we can find many examples of this in the world. I'm going to share one. Kenyan environmentalist, politician, and prophet Wangari Maathai, may her memory be a blessing, drew attention to this truth in Kenya. She started what's known as the Green Belt movement, which, get this, would plant over 40, or inspire the planting of over 40 million trees. 40 million trees, starting in Kenya and then spreading throughout much of Africa. Now, the reason that Maathai did this is she noticed that too many trees in Kenya had been cut down. She noticed that actually because women came to her. She was a politician. They were complaining that they had to walk too far to get firewood. But they also were lacking clean water and food. Increasingly, the trees had been cut down for coffee and tea plantations for export, and most of that wealth was going to just a few people. And the many people who were before self-sufficient with orchards of fruit trees, growing their own food, able to collect firewood, did not have those resources anymore. Because without the trees, they didn't have the firewood. Without the trees, most importantly, the soil eroded, the streams became filled with silt, and then eventually dried up. The very founts of love became parched and dried, as our hymn says. Now, if you know me, you know I love coffee and I love tea, but you can't eat coffee or tea. So, Wangari Maathai created this Green Belt movement, and women started planting seeds. And she even went to prison once it caught enough momentum and it started to disrupt the status quo, and those greedy boys in the world were afraid, greedy boys, were afraid that they would lose all the wealth that they were getting.
pick your speaker up.
But she did it, and the movement succeeded, and it's made channels for the stream of love for so many. And this is what we're called to do. And it's important to remember that planting of 40 million trees started with just a few people planting one seed and one seed and one seed. So one way that we can make channels for the stream of love, one way we can start that process is to cultivate gratitude. So I want to invite you now and throughout the service to come up and get slips of paper from this table over here and write or even draw your gratitudes on them. We'll have a moment later in the service where you can add them to our gratitude jar. So think of all the gifts of the generous earth. Think of all the gifts we receive from our society that maybe we take for granted. Think of the gifts that you receive from the people in your life. Write those down or draw them, and later we'll have a time to share them in our gratitude journal.
Okay, part 2. Years before the boy went away in the canoe, when the giving tree was not yet just the stump, one of the boy's children came to visit the tree. What this child found was a sapling that had grown out from one of the apples that had fallen from the tree. She brought water and cared for the sapling. The girl and the sapling grew up together. It took many years, but when the girl was a teenager, the sapling began to bear fruit. The girl took the apples and used the seeds to plant more trees. She tended this orchard for many years. And when those trees bore fruit, she took the apples, and with their seeds, she planted more trees. By now, her orchards were producing more apples than she needed. She offered them for others to come and collect the fruit from her trees. In this way, many were fed by the generosity of the girl, who had learned generosity from her father's giving tree. Not only did the girl share apples from her orchards, she also taught others how to plant the seeds and care for the saplings so they could grow apple trees, could grow an orchard, could grow so many trees that they could share the fruit with others. In this way, many, many people learned generosity from her father's giving tree. And after a long time, the boy came back again. "I am sorry, boy," said the tree, "but I have nothing left to give to you. My apples are gone." "My teeth are too weak for apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing on them." "I am too old to swing on branches," said the boy. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You cannot climb." "I am too tired to climb," said the boy. "I am so sorry," sighed the tree. I wish that I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I'm just an old stump, and I'm sorry." "I don't need very much," said the boy. "Just a quiet place to sit and rest, because I'm so tired." "Well," said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could, "well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down and rest." And the boy did. And then his daughter wandered over from the nearby orchard, and she came and sat on the stump with her father. And he asked her how she was doing, because he was so busy making a fortune in the world that he had not seen her in many, many years. She told him how she had planted the seed and grown the orchard, and from that another orchard. He smiled to think of all her wealth. And then she told him how she had started to give away apples, realizing that she had enough. She told him that she had learned from the example of the giving tree that happiness comes from giving to others. And she told him how she had taught others the same lesson, and they had planted trees and had given away apples and taught the others to do the same. She smiled. Her father looked at her, absolutely dumbfounded, and then slowly, very, very slowly, a smile spread across his face, and the girl and the boy, her father, and the tree were all happy. The end.
So I don't have a lot to say about the ending of the story, except I hope you notice you can't buy that if you buy Shel Silverstein's The Giving Tree. We changed it up a little bit. I want to invite you to look at the gratitudes you've written, or if you've already put them in our gratitude jar. Which by the way, lives here, and you can put gratitudes in it every single week throughout the year, and then we share them at our Friends Giving that we had yesterday. So think about those gratitudes that you wrote, or look at them, and notice that each of your gratitudes is the result of someone else's generosity. Maybe another person, maybe the natural world, but it's the result of someone else's generosity. We could call that our generosity jar just as much as our gratitude jar. As it says in the song that you heard, God's work isn't done by God, it's done by people. Now, some of us, as you use, don't even believe in God. And if you don't believe in God, you definitely don't believe you definitely do believe that God's work isn't done by God, right? Some of us, you use, do believe in God, but for the most part, it's hard to say anything categorically about Unitarian Universalists. We're free thinkers. But for the most part, whether we believe in God or not, you generally agree that it's up to us to do the work that makes the world a good place. And we also believe that we don't do that work alone. As it said in the song, she goes out on a limb and begins to build a home. And it's enough just to look around and know that she's not alone. So look around. Know that even when you feel like you're going out on a limb, when it feels risky, uncertain, scary, know that you are not alone. This community is here with you. Together, we make this world a home. I also love the lines in the song that say she's trying to sing just enough so that the air around her moves, to make music like mercy that gives what it is and has nothing to prove. Now, it's not always easy to give just enough but not too much. That's a part of what we're learning as we're exploring, particularly as we're exploring generosity, as we're exploring how to be together as human beings. But I think that our new proposed UU values, all of them, especially that second phrase, the doing phrase, that you have on your new bookmarks, helps us to know how to make music like mercy. Mercy, love, compassion, caring. It's an act of love to build accessible and inclusive communities, and it's one we can't do alone, but that we can do together. It's an act of caring to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation, and one we can't do alone. We need each other to do. It's an act of love to dismantle racism, an act of caring to learn from one another and celebrate our diverse cultures, experiences, and theologies. It's an act of love to adapt to our changing world and grow together spiritually and ethically. This is the work that we do together from that foundation of generosity, sharing our faith, presence, and resources with each other while connected in relationships of mutuality and interdependence. So we're going to ritually embody that. We're going to have a bread and cider communion. I don't know if that's ever been done here at Accotink before. It's a tradition in some of our congregations. It's reminiscent in some ways of the Christian Eucharist, and it's different. So in the context of this service, where we've been critiquing the greedy boy and the martyrdom of the giving tree, the martyrdom that's often expected of women and the poor and the very earth, and our exploitative economic worldview that sees others as mere resources to be used. In the context here, the resurrection theme, the idea when you do a Christian Eucharist is that you're taking that resurrected body of Christ into you so that you can be vessels of love in the world. So in our context, we can think of that as the undying nature of a generous love that flourishes in relationships of mutuality and respect. And we can, as we take in the bread and the cider, commit to embodying that generous love and that connection in relationships of mutuality. So Unitarian Universalism is a really wondrous tradition. And I just want to say, if you want this bread and cider to symbolize the body of Christ, you can have it symbolize that. You can be Christian and Unitarian Universalist. You can also be Jewish and Unitarian Universalist, Buddhist and Unitarian Universalist, and on and on and on. Pagan and Unitarian Universalist. So that's why we have this cider communion. I think it's important that it can mean different things to different people. So I also want to say that corn is indigenous to the Americas. 70% of what humans eat now originate in the Americas. It's remarkable, the agricultural genius of the First Nations people of the Americas. Apples, however, are not indigenous to the Americas. So we can see a beautiful meeting of cultures, one that perhaps has not yet fully come into being in our world, also in this, okay? And also I said that generous love and those connected relationships of mutuality. So let's all rise. And committing ourselves to being vessels of generous love, may we eat the bread and drink the cider from our generous earth. All right, I'm going to say a harvest prayer. This is adapted from a Thanksgiving blessing by Reverend Naomi King. Spirit of life and love, and you can join hands if you feel so moved, and if you can figure out how to do that with your cider. Let us join hands and hearts in gratitude on this wondrous day where we have the abundance of life before us, this day of bounty. On this day of bounty, may we remember all those who do not have enough, who are afraid, who are lonely, who suffer. We wish for the abundance of this world to be shared generously, for fear to become love, for the lonely to feel welcomed, and for the suffering to know rest and joy. For these good gifts, we offer our gratitude. We commit to generous love, to being vessels of generous love. May it be so, and may we be among those who make it so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.